Jeremy Ginsburg, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, we've known each other for quite a while, and there are hundreds of topics that I think we could explore and fill a whole podcast and a ton of value with. But I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the audience. And will you tell me a story about a defining moment in your life that has really led to you showing up how you show up in the world today and impacting the world in the way you do?
It's a great question to kick us off. And yes, this was about 2018, early in 2018. And as you know, I've dealt with chronic pain, chronic headaches, migraines, a lot of fatigue, different health issues have come up. And at this point, I was sleeping most of the day. I just felt so tired. I was just not in good shape. And I was actually visiting my parents. And essentially, my mom and dad didn't say it exactly, but they were like, you can't just sit around here. You have to go seek help. So I ended up going to a doctor who prescribed me a pharmaceutical. And essentially, given my background and my own self-discovery healing journey, the Western medical industry hasn't really been able to find a root cause for my pain. So the story that they were telling me is, hey, we're really sorry you're getting a lot of headaches and we wish we could help, but the best we can do is you take this pill and the first 3 months are going to be very painful and then maybe it's going to help you. But we really don't know what's wrong with you and this is the best we can do. At the same time, around that period, I had a call with who is now my spiritual teacher. And in this conversation, I was explaining my symptoms. And for the first time, someone actually understood and wasn't fazed by anything I was sharing. And basically, he had this very woo-woo way of explaining things and how I'm a spiritual being and I come into this body and I'm sensitive and using all these words that I didn't really understand or agree with at the time. And essentially, I had this decision where on one side of my shoulder, I have the industry or the culture that I grew up in, and they're saying, we don't know what's wrong with you, but take this pill and maybe it will help and it'll reduce the pain from an 8 to a 4 at best, right? And that didn't really excite me. And I had on my other shoulder this spiritual teacher who's super kind of out there. I'm not really sure what's going on, but he's telling me I'm special and I'm unique and this is all a part of my superpower and I'm learning to access this infinite energy that I'm not so accustomed to working with. And basically at that time, I chose the latter. I chose to work with this spiritual teacher and not take Western medicine pharmaceuticals. And for me, it's just put me on this deeper path of exploring who I am, exploring the unknown, questioning myself, moving into what I'm avoiding or what I'm doubting, and just discovering more truth on the inside and on the outside.
And so what do headaches and health look like now? Have you found a way to transcend a lot of these things? And what have you kind of learned in this journey to understand your own health?
That's a great question. I've learned that everything is connected and it's also a lot more simple than we often make things. So I used to play the victim role where I wasn't really sure what was going on with my health. And I would kind of play this, why me? And I don't know why I'm in pain and nobody knows. And I'm just frustrated. Where now, as I've taken this approach of being more mindful and aware and just simply noticing my energy, noticing the subtleties, noticing what my mind is doing, noticing my emotional state, noticing my physical state, and realizing how it all is pretty logical, even though we can't technically see a lot of these things or measure them in Western science. And so it's definitely opened myself up as well to a lot of the practices that we've discussed, a lot of new tools that are ancient techniques that we've just lost touch with that are still equally as powerful and way less expensive.
Now, when I do speaking coaching, one of the things that I encourage people to put into their talks is a universalizing statement. And that what you would say in this case is, for me, it was mysterious headaches. But for you, it could be this or that or this. For me, and I'm talking about me, I'm no longer quoting you. I had a similar health condition show up, uh, some different signs of pain and fatigue and anxiety, all appearing in their own way. But this, what you're describing, these kind of mysterious symptoms, aren't necessarily that uncommon, especially for people who have a high calling, who are ambitious, who want to make an impact on the world, like a lot of the listeners here. So again, for you, it was headaches. But what are some of the other ways that this same issue that you're discovering, the same misalignment, can show up in the businesses of maybe some of the people you've been working with, or people in general?
I would say whatever the loudest voice of resistance is. So for some people, that's doubt. I'm not enough. I'm not sure if I'm worthy of this. For other people, it's maybe shame or competition. I need to be better than someone else. And for others, myself included, I didn't listen to the voice. So it manifested in physical form. And then it took on the shape of a headache. But stress, anxiety, workaholicism, depression, fatigue, it shows up in different flavors for different people, unfortunately. But I would say the biggest thing that people feel like is holding them back is probably what they need to explore, and that can become their path for greater expansion.
So you help a lot of people with this, no matter kind of what the symptoms are, which again is kind of the surface level. You're saying like the symptoms of my headache or jaw pain or anxiety, or even just being in a business, or like just that feeling that you're here kind of in your life, and you want to be 2 or 3 degrees of magnitude higher because you know it and you feel it. So you've had to do this work yourself, and you've worked with many people, including myself, on it. What are some of the steps that we can do to discover some of these underlying root stories that are causing these physical pains or these frustrations in our life and our business?
I would say the first step is becoming aware, literally looking in the mirror and just looking, and not creating any stories, not rationalizing, not numbing, and just becoming aware of actually what's going on. Because if you're lying to yourself and you're creating the story, well, oh yeah, I could take care of my body, but the business is this place, and I need to go out for drinks with this person and so. We create these stories, and as I know you know a lot about stories, but these mental stories, and we attach to them, and that becomes what we believe in, and it's just simply not true. So step one, I would say, is becoming aware, and whether that's talking with your friends, hiring a coach, therapist, mastermind, opening up with your partner, some space to share these things as well. And that's what I would call support, or space. Really, it doesn't need to be support. You could do it on your own if you're independent. And then the third step, I would say, is tools. So actions, intentions, tools, and that's where, I've got a big supply, if anything, too many tools these days to share with people.
Well, I'd love to hear more about some tools to actually get some awareness. Now I'm standing in the mirror and I'm tired of looking at myself. So what do I do? Do I ask myself a question? Do I read a journal? Like or do I assess the feelings that are coming up? Like, what is this process of becoming aware, and what's the first step to really opening myself up to, hey, maybe there's a different story here?
That's a great question to begin with, especially if you don't have a coach or a mentor or someone you trust to teach you these techniques. I would assume strongly that everyone's got at least one or two or even more tools or activities or habits that they've thought about exploring, but they haven't taken action. So maybe they've watched a documentary on something, or they saw a video about it, or their friend got super into something, whether it's yoga, meditation, breath work, journaling. I would say start with the least foreign, something that's somewhat familiar, because you're going to feel the least resistance towards that. Otherwise, if you're working with, a physical trainer, you start with what the physical trainer tells you, or you work with a coach, or try to figure out who you trust, and you can access tools from that as well.
So A little bit of a jump from this, but I think it's a good transition question now. Um, I think one of the big challenges I faced, especially early on, and I think this is a big problem for a lot of us, is especially as entrepreneurs, we're taking on a lot of information. We have a lot of different expectations. We're probably comparing ourselves to others. And it makes it so that what my voice says and what's truly like, what's my authentic self and what those desires are often we're kind of burying and suppressing those. And also at the same time, we're kind of cultivating these other voices. And so it can be hard to really even understand like where my authentic self and how to bring those parts of me forward, or what that voice even is compared to the maybe I should be doing this, or I should be expecting this, or I saw this on a webinar. So how can we really tune in to what's deeply us and not these kind of bullshit and expectations that have been surrounding us?
That's a great question. I would say if you're on a super tight budget, I would just record yourself doing video vlogs, and then watch them. And you'll just notice, you'll pick stuff up and say, wow, oh, ooh, that sounds like my dad. Or, oh, don't be so straight. You'll start giving yourself advice based on what you're saying. So I'd say that's step one, or one option. It's also very helpful to journal. There's a quote that I love. I forget who said it, but it's, I don't know what I think until I read what I write. So that's a great way to gain perspective, because that's really all you're going for here, perspective. Because what happens is, as a culture, we're so addicted to our thoughts that we act upon them without realizing that it's just a thought and we don't need to react. And so if you practice meditation, that's a great way as well. Breath work I found is great. For those who can't meditate, we do breath work. It's a efficient route to the same headspace, and you can just feel much more relaxed and calm. And lastly, it sounds so simple, but honestly, as a culture, especially men and especially entrepreneurs, people who are busy, it's all just a matter of space. Just having someone who's going to sit across from you and just listen. And then maybe they see something that you weren't able to because you're so close to it. It's almost like they just kind of hold up a mirror and then they ask one or two questions that helps you go deeper and deeper and deeper. And simply having a safe space to share that, whether it's a friend or a partner or a mastermind. It doesn't need to be something formal or paid. It can be anything. It's rather just about having someone who's going to just reflect back to you honestly what they see, and not giving you their story as well.
I think there's a lot of truth in that, and I experience the same things in marketing. A lot of the people that I'm working with putting together their talks and their messages, though the story is an external story instead of an internal story, it's still very much, it requires an outside perspective, or it's very helpful to have one. But I would say even if you don't have one, and kind of on that journaling exercise or listening to yourself doing a video blog describing um, something that I think would be really helpful, and something that I've learned that I didn't quite hear in that, is going through it and you do start to react in certain ways. Oh, I shouldn't have said this, or oh, it was dumb that I said that. And I think it's important when starting to reflect in this way, that you don't necessarily believe the thoughts that are happening, but then you observe kind of your own responses to it. And if you can notice, oh, I'm thinking this when I talk about that, so that's when you can really start to see the stories, because you're allowing your kind of judgmental mind of yourself to be focused on an external thing, on the video recording, which gives you an opportunity to catch and observe it and see really, really what you're saying. And I would just offer the idea that you don't necessarily have to believe that first impulse thing. It's just something that's, like I was mentioning before, has kind of been trained into us. And so, but actually seeing and noticing those, and noticing your responses, I think is a really valuable way to start to understand some of these stories that may or may not be holding us back or changing our perspectives.
Beautifully put. I would even add almost never believe thoughts unless you're creating them willfully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
From my experience. At the same time, I encourage everyone listening to this to find their own truth, find what works for them, because I didn't get here today by following the advice of other people I didn't agree with.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell me about some of the people that you've worked with, and maybe you can give us some examples about some of the stories or blocks and how they were showing up in different people's lives, and maybe some ways that once they got the insight on, oh, this is what I think, or this is how I'm operating, how did that change for them?
Yeah, so I'll leave his name anonymously for confidentiality purposes, but we can just call him Jay. And when Jay came to me, he was running a fairly successful business, but inside he was just dying. He felt so unpowerful. His confidence was low. He had accepted the fact that this may be the rest of his life. He just depressed, not very happy, but he has this business on the outside that looks great. It creates on the outside what looks like freedom, but inside it was all coming from fear, it's coming from lack. So Jay has an extremely inspiring story. When he was 18, he was faced with a decision where he either had to stay with his family, who was strongly invested in the church, or he could leave and then his family would never talk to him again. And so he decided to leave. And so ever since then, he developed all these amazing strategies on how to make friends, how to gain influence, how to get jobs, how to get people to like him, because he had to essentially relearn how to function in society. And that got him to amazing places. He was able to shoot to the top of companies and start his own business and find amazing people. But then later we realized that it only could take him so far because it was coming from this place of lack. It was coming from fear, where he's essentially in survival mode. And so he's got to put food on the table. He's got to make friends because he doesn't meet anybody. He's going to go crazy and he needs support. And he's still running these old programs 10, 15 years later when it comes to business. So he goes into a new business meeting, and on paper everything looks fine. The deal's about to happen, but in his head he's freaking out. He's anxious. Oh, what if they change their mind? What if this? What if he finds out I'm a fraud? All these voices that are just sabotaging the situation. So what we did from day one is we started using tools to practice recreating the scripts on the inside. So as you know, breathwork is one of the main tools I'm excited about now and for the last 4 years. And so essentially going back and creating a new response where the mind says something and then he steps in and say, hey, wait a second, I'm going to do some breath work, raise my vibration, feel much better, and then go into this situation with a completely new perspective. And since then, his business has grown. His proposals are way bigger. He feels more confident. He's leading bigger teams. Essentially, when you work from the inside out, your business becomes a reflection of you. So the more you grow and expand, the more you're able to step up and really lead to your full capacity.
That's something in entrepreneurship that was maybe at first daunting to me, but has become more and more of an attractive and an exciting idea, and becomes really, it's becoming more and more the core focus rather than the results. But, to create the business that you really want, you have to become a different person. You have to grow and develop yourself and undo these kind of stories and strengthen and really become aligned and in touch with these deep parts of you. And I think the process of becoming an entrepreneur, again, is very, it makes you better. And I think that is really one of the greatest treasures of the journey. It's not making, a $1 billion Snapchat startup exit or anything like that, or even like something maybe a little bit more along the lines of a lot of the listeners here, of just building a business that allows some kind of financial freedom so that you can work when you want to work and travel when you want to travel. But I think that the really deep and powerful thing, and the true value here, is who do you have to become to create that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's super empowering, especially for people just getting started. There's a lot of unknowns. So it really challenges you. All right, who are you when you're learning how to edit the video for the first time and you have to learn these new buttons and programs that you never heard of, but you have a deadline the next day? You know, who do you become when you show up in a room of someone you've followed for the last 3 years on a podcast and they go out and, you know, introduce themselves? Like, how do you respond to these situations as your dreams start coming true? And yeah, it's beautiful. This is actually making me miss kind of the come up the first few years when every other day I'm like, do I know how to make any money? What's going on?
Well, and on that, this is a really good opportunity. I want to hear about some of the tools that you work with and that you work with your clients with, but I want to couch it in this question. There's a lot of coaches here. I'm a coach. You're a coach. And some days you got to show up and deliver for people, but you're not feeling it. You're not feeling, maybe your energy's low. Maybe it feels like you have a hangover, even if you weren't drinking, or, you know, it's just not your day. But you still got to show up and do the coaching call. Are there things that you do to take care of yourself and transform your energy? How can you handle yourself in those moments and make deliver quality coaching even when you feel like you're the one that needs it in the moment?
Well, first, before I get into that, I just want to say that it is powerful to lead with vulnerability. And so there's times when I'm not in my power, but the way I open up has far more of an impact on my clients because I'm not trying to be the superhero who always has my shit together, this perfect coach. Look at me, I'm strong, I make all this money. And I feel like that's a new paradigm that we're getting into, where if you're the leader, the CEO, the boss, the manager, being honest, being open, being vulnerable is a very effective way to increase trust and connection and rapport with whoever you're working with. So I just wanted to have a little disclaimer on that. But getting into the tools, one thing that I've brilliantly done by accident is I teach the tools that I love to do as well. So sometimes we're on a call. We did this, you know, on our last call, we did a round of breath work together where it's win-win because I get to feel the benefits, you feel the benefits, and also we're in this energy together where we've just done this practice. And so I find breath work to be the most effective, efficient way. Literally, I'm talking 5-7 minutes, you can transform your state super fast. And secondly, a more internal mental or spiritual practice is just having faith in yourself. Having trust that even though the mind's going crazy, we can't do this, everyone's going to laugh at us, this is never going to work. Just tuning that out and saying, I trust myself. Let's go rock this person's world.
So let's dig into breath work, because I think a lot of people listening probably don't know what that is, what that entails, what that looks like. Can you tell us a little bit about, maybe give us some examples of what breath work looks like, what it feels like? And I know you've studied a lot about this, so maybe even describing some of the physiological things that happen when we start to intentionally use our breath.
Sure. I like to talk about it like going to the gym, but just for your breath, for your diaphragm. And so essentially you get the same benefits from exercise. You get the same neurochemicals. You're able to manipulate your atomic nervous system. And this is all proven in science. But basically it's just a way to, it's a controlled meditation. That's how I like to put it. But there's so many different forms of breath work. You know, there's a ton that come from yoga. There's the Wim Hof method that I've studied in. There's another one called Soma. There's DMT breath. There's all these different names. We've come up with a brand called Infinity Breath because from my experience, again, in my journey, I studied 2 different breath techniques that are probably the most popular ones outside of yoga, but neither of them were really able to cure me completely. I was still in pain. And so what we like to do is invite other people to experiment with their own body and find their own breath, because there's so much you can do on a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level, all with your breath. So it really depends what you're looking for. As far as physiological responses, I mean,
I want more energy, and so does everybody else on this podcast. So what do we do to get what's a more energy breath work?
More energy. So, If you want more energy, breathe deeply into your belly and then up to your chest and just find a rhythm. So we use the four elements in infinity breathwork. So we start with water. So you just breathe in and out. And the point here is really just to get out of your head. So breathe in, and I would say 30, 40, 50 times, whatever feels right. Long enough so that you get lost in the flow, if you will. And then we do an exhale, breathing out, retention. And this is where a lot of the positive components, and you could skip this step, but I wouldn't recommend it early on. And then you can hold your attention for 1 minute, 2 minutes, extremely long time. And then when you take that next breath in, the fire breath, and when you hold that, that's when you're going to feel the energy. So what you're doing is essentially you're going from the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest, at will, you're going into the sympathetic nervous system. So you get to control your body. You get to control the stress response, the dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine, all the good stuff. It's chemistry at a deep level. And then after that deep inhale, we have one final one. Exhale with the air. Soft landing. So that's just to make sure you can come back and be rested and relaxed, and you don't stay in the stress state for too long.
And you can repeat that process, and it doesn't take longer than a few minutes to go through that whole thing once. And you can, I agree in this that you can go. There's been times where I've used this exact same exercise. I get home after flying all day, and I still have a couple of coaching calls. You know, I've been working at workshops or speaking at events before, and I'm like, wow, I'm super tired. And I just lay down on the floor and start working on that breath work for 10 or 15 minutes. And then, you know, sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm feeling amazing. But I think a more realistic thing is like I go from, man, I don't want to do anything to I can get through this day, which is a win. And also kind of a disclaimer, I think, especially starting out, and especially if you're just listening to this podcast and you've never tried breath work before, and you start doing your first 3 breaths, and then you're like, oh my God, this is going to take so much long. This is so much work. And you just stop doing it. But I would encourage people, like, you can, if you just get through, if you can take these big breaths where you really fill up your whole belly and your whole chest, and just in and out. And if you can get to 20 or 30 breaths and you're really committing and really like working on kind of filling up your whole body with air, you'll almost you'll start to feel it already. I remember not early on, you start to feel kind of a tingling, not unlike if your fingers were asleep and the blood flow was coming off, but then all of a sudden, at least this is my experience, and maybe it's different for other people, but you start to like physically experience things. And yeah, I'm sure I'm not sure exactly which chemicals are happening in my personal experience, but I feel this. And there is something when yeah, when you'll be surprised at how long. Another thing that sounds totally crazy, especially right when you're starting out, is holding your breath at the bottom of your breath. And after doing that, after going through this thing, doing 30 really big breaths, 40 really big breaths, and then holding your breath at the bottom, you might think, oh, well, you know, I'm going to, like, if we just tried it right now, we could probably hold our breath for 15 seconds or something like that. But after this, you can hold your breath for a minute and a half, maybe 2, even more. And again, it starts to create a deeper feeling, an experience, which it feels really good. It's one of my favorite things to do, just starting out in the morning, to go from kind of, you know, just rolling out of bed, and I can, you know, turn the teapot on, and then, you know, you just get to lay down and rest and take care of yourself a little more. But it's a great way to wake up and transform and shift the energy. And again, my favorite part is after this, taking the big breath and then holding it in and kind of squeezing your belly, because your body just like feasts on the oxygen, and it's so happy. And like you can really feel a lot of this happening. And so it's so simple. And if a skeptical person in their first few breaths might discount it, but it's so surprisingly simple and so surprisingly powerful. You can do it on your own, but yeah, there's lots to add.
And I'll just add a simpler version as well, Because in the workshops, I can tell some people are skeptical when I tell them breath work can increase your creativity and inspiration and all these things. If you just do 30 rapid breaths, it's technically not hyperventilating because you're doing it while you're in a controlled state. Hyperventilation is when you're not in control, you're panicking, so your body takes on the response and you feel this disconnect, and that's why it's scary and dangerous for the body. But this is not hyperventilation. You're doing it at your own control. So just take 30 deep breaths, in, out, and then skip the retention and just breathe in and hold. And if you want to actual measure this, do as many push-ups as you can, just regularly breathing, and then do 30 deep breaths in and then hold. And then while holding the breath, you'll be able to do more push-ups than when you were breathing. And that to me dispels all doubt, and people feel amazing. It's quite powerful.
It's true. I've experienced it before. You can definitely, even if you haven't done push-ups in a while, you'll be surprised at what you're capable of when you kind of supercharge your body with oxygen.
Yeah, and what I love about it is just so empowering. Where I come from, this background where I've had so many doctors and healers and psychotherapists and different medicine people tell me they could help me and they weren't able to. This is something that's naturally available. It's free in every country, and it holds the power to heal your body. Your body knows how to heal itself. It's just a matter of showing up, believing in it, and giving it the time and space to do so. And so once you have that aha moment where it's like, whoa, I just did this simply by breathing, to me, that's a powerful moment.
So something that I've really noticed about you, and I think what's really defining about a lot of the work you do, is you help people transform their energy in many different ways. And I think the breath work is a great example of transforming physical energy. But there's a lot of times where either, I maybe expecting a client and then they bail out on me, or something goes wrong in my business, or I'm facing a challenge, or usually I'm like facing a really big uncertain decision. I'm not sure whether to do option A or option B. And you've suggested a lot of ways for kind of internally shifting the energy, shifting the mental story as well. One of them that I'd love to chat with you a little bit about, I was just working on one of these exercises this morning, is called Kalego.
Yeah, do you want me to explain that?
Yes, please.
Great. So Kalego is so this is funny. We were talking about, yoga and that stuff that's proven for 1,000 years. This guy, his name's Kyle. He has a friend named Diego, and one day they just made it up and called it Kalego. That being said, it's very effective. And essentially what you do is you talk about the future as if it already happened. And so, for example, I could say, wow, it's 2025 and I just made my first $1 million and it was so cool. Once I went on Oprah and my book really blew up, then I started to do X, Y, Z. And essentially you're using your mind to jump ahead to the future so that it can create possible roadmaps for you that are empowering, that are exciting, that are inspiring. You can use your mind to be creative rather than destructive. So say a client doesn't show up, you're thinking, oh, he's not going to pay me. This is stupid. My whole day is going to be off. What do I do for the next 45 minutes? How am I supposed to make up for this? Whatever story is going on. From my point of view, anything you do is going to be better than just listening to that voice and kind of feeling sorry for yourself.
It's pretty much an anti-Kalego. Most of the time we're doing the exact opposite of it, where we're imagining ourselves in the future as miserable because we messed up and didn't do that thing, or we did one thing wrong. At least I have seen myself in those kind of modes, and taking the time to think about that and think about your future in a positive light, and encourage yourself, and imagine yourself being successful. Simple, again, very, very powerful.
Exactly. And so say this situation, a client blows you off or doesn't show up. That's kind of harsh language. And then you're thinking, oh, the next 3 clients are all going to not show up and my whole day is going to be wasted. And whatever story you're telling yourself, take a step back. And then I really believe, and my coach preaches this, the best tool, the right tool at the right time. So I believe asking yourself, hey, what's the best tool to use right now? How can I move this energy? And if Kalego shows up, you essentially recreate the story. And so this is going to help everybody who's interested in your podcast, because they already are interested in stories. So now instead of writing it out, they get to speak it out loud. And so instead of this victim story, he was late, he didn't call me, I'm the victim here, you can say, oh, wow. So, Kyle didn't show up for my podcast interview, but then I saw an old friend and then we went out to the park and then he told me about this new business meetup that I was going to. And I went to the business meetup and I ended up landing 6 clients that night. So it turned out to be this amazing miracle in disguise, because at first I was frustrated, but it turned out that life was really in my favor, and you're recreating a story that feels empowering and that's open to possibilities.
So that leads to a really interesting question that I have, and again, just speaking to the very maybe type A masculine type that I am. The first minute or two, and I'd recommend when doing this exercise, just record it into a phone. I think when I try to write Kalego exercises, it's too easy to self-edit because I can't write fast as I think. So I'm just like talking. And what the real magic starts to happen, you've got to do it for, 4 or 5 minutes. And you start to, during those first 4 minutes, it's honestly kind of junk. It's okay. And you're like thinking positively. And so maybe it's not exactly all junk, but it's like you're still thinking in your think brain and what you should be doing and your strategic everything. But once you start to get past that and you start to feel like you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, then you start to really open up to new and surprising possibilities. And sometimes, again, it may turn out exactly the way that you describe. I went to this meetup and find 6 new clients, but it's more about just focusing on the opportunities before you instead of the negative or any challenges. And I think it's really similar to an interview we had with Mark England a couple of months back on how we need to be very specific with the language we use in communicating with others. And this is just a matter of translating that language into yourself. And the question that I have now, and one of the earliest challenges you gave me was trying to see my autoimmune condition that I had as a superpower. And I did not like that idea at all in the outset. A lot of the things that are really holding us back, they're frustrating, they're the enemies, and we want to, get rid of them or eliminate it, and things like that. And over the time working together and through a lot of different projects, I've started to see it as a gift. It's helped me find a unique group of people that I can work with and impact in my business. It's taught me a lot about myself and not just managing my own health, but managing my mind, like you're saying, because the mind can create a lot of these things. And so you started this story off talking about your own challenges, and I'd love to kind of close in hearing how your headaches and kind of what challenged you has become your superpower.
I would say it's become my path, and it's opened me up to new parts of myself that I didn't know was there. It's brought me to different communities and different crowds that I would not have sought after myself. And more importantly, it's brought me more truth than I could ever learn in schools or from teachers or from my family. It's just been this teacher on the inside that's here to remind me who I am, to remind me of my power, to remind me of my deepest truth. And it's also given me a ton of inspiration to actually stand for something in this world and not just be another entrepreneur who gets by and makes a lot of money and maybe does some videos or music here, rather really share a message. And for me, my life has become my message, where I'm just a living example of the things I believe in. I don't really go out and preach it very often to other people, but it's forced me into this opportunity to walk my own path, to discover what things mean to me. And then as a byproduct, I felt so inspired and called to go share with other people. And now it's become my main business and source of income, where I'm able to help other people with things that I learned from this. And so if you would have told me that 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been excited about the idea of making money. Oh, cool. I get to try all these things and breath work and plant medicine and go around and teach other people. And I get to win, in this game. But for me, the most fulfilling aspect is being able to take my life experience and watch other people's lives transform in the blink of an eye sometimes, based on things that I just stumbled upon, 3 years ago, and watch other people be able to grow and benefit based on the things that I've learned, because I took the difficult path, if you will, or the road less traveled.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, it's been a pleasure discovering a lot of really simple and actionable ways to transform our energy internally, externally, and in the world around us. Where can we go to learn more about you and to follow more of your journey?
Yeah, thanks. It's jeremyginsburg.com, Ginsburg. And you can follow me on Instagram as well, at Jeremy Ginsburg. And if you're interested, I could share with you a breathwork video on YouTube that you can post in the show notes, maybe.
That'd be a great thing. Yeah, we'll absolutely do that.
All right. So then you can find my YouTube there. Snuck that one
Perfect.
in.
Okay. Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us on the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. Much love.